Aloha, my name is Shelby Morrison, and I am the Programs and Communications Coordinator at ikahi Mediation Center. Welcome to our Finding Solutions Growing Peace Brown Bag Lunch Series. Ikahi is a nonprofit community mediation center serving East Hawaii. We were founded in 1983 as a program of the island of Hawaii's YMCA, and in 2006 became our own independent nonprofit. We empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to find their own best solutions. To achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and trainings just like this one to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. Our Brown Bag Lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon on Zoom, and you do need to register for each one on Eventbrite to receive that individual Zoom link. Our next Eventbrite Brown Bag will be with Anne Marie Smoke on the topic Hot Buttons, Building Emotional Resilience in Triggering Moments on November 21st. So feel free to register at the same link you used to register for this brown bag. It will be in the chat for you. At the end of today's talk, we'll ask you to fill out a short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. When I put the survey link in the chat, please just take a few moments to give us your thoughts, and we'll also send out an email later with the handout and slides, as well as this video link. So without further ado, let me introduce our topic and our speaker. Team building, navigating the 5 stages of development. And we are joined by Dennis Higashiguchi, who has worked in training and development in Hawaii since 1974 and is the president of Dennis Higashiguchi and Associates LLC, a full-service training company. An accomplished trainer and facilitator, Dennis has an extensive experience in most aspects of training and facilitation, working with state, federal, and county agencies, as well as in retail, healthcare, construction, and financial sectors. Take it away, Dennis.
Hey, thanks, Shelby. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I'm really excited about being here because I really believe in team building, especially today. And just a real quick comment: given the situations that are going on, excuse me, in our economy today, especially as it relates to staffing, I think that team building is often overlooked as an opportunity to help strengthen that issue, at least until we're able to get back to the kind of numbers that we need in order to fill positions. Most organizations that I work with are experiencing staff shortages in many areas, some as many as 25, 35, 40%. And while team building doesn't mitigate all of that, it certainly can serve as a way of helping to strengthen, if you will, the organization through looking at the team perhaps as another individual in that sense. And so with that in mind, let me share some of my thoughts here on how to build and sustain a successful team from the approach of team development and the stages of team development. So today, I want to try to accomplish about 3 or 4 things. Number one, increase your awareness of the importance of teamwork. So we'll spend just a few minutes building context. What is teamwork? Why is it important? And so forth. And then within that context, what we'll do is we'll take a look at the stages of team formation. What kinds of stages do teams normally go through in the process of forming themselves? And as we're doing that, I'd like you to think back and say, okay, where the teams that I belong to, whether they're the professional teams, the work teams I'm with, church teams, social teams, family teams, when you think about in that context, we're all parts of lots of different teams. And so I'd like you to think about those that are real critical in your life right now, and where do you think they stand as we go through these stages. And then we'll look at some tactics, some elements necessary for successful teams. I'm going to share some what I think are important issues as it relates to how to deal with these different stages as you go through them, how to go through them successfully. And at the end of the session, you'll receive a copy of the slides that you're looking at, as well as a workbook syllabus, if you will, that contains in detail the details about a lot of the issues that we're covering in this hour, and so you can take a deeper dive into some of these things. I've also included in there some not only information but also some tactics and strategies that you can use to help strengthen your team as it relates to whatever stage your team might be in. So we'll include those. Now, just a little bit of context, right? There's a couple of comments, just things that people who know and people who have experienced it, certainly, and experts, if you will, some in the field of business and so forth. This is Steve Jobs. Great things in business are never done by one person, right? They're done by a team of people. Another comment, none of us is as smart as all of us. This is comment by Kenneth Blanchard. Ken Blanchard wrote the 1 Minute Manager, and along with Paul Hersey developed the leadership model called situational leadership, which if you're looking, just as in passing, if you're looking for a real good solid leadership model that is easy to relate to, is very practical and yet very helpful in terms of developing leadership, you might want to take a look at that. It's pretty well explained in his book, the 1 Minute Manager. He also has a series of 1 Minute Manager books that he's written that relate to this model. So you may want to take a look at that. And then finally, there's I love this saying: individually we are one drop, together we are an ocean. We are an ocean, and I really this kind of says it all. And this is Ryonosuke is a Japanese short story writer. He passed away back in the 1930s, but he wrote about 150 short stories, and so he's very well known in Japan. And one of his short stories was converted into a famous film that Akira Kurosawa actually developed and produced, called Rashomon in the 1950s. And so this one I really like. Together, individually we're one drop, but together we are an ocean. So I'd like you to think about that as we go through some of these things. What is our ocean, and how do we contribute as the drop? So a couple of definition issues. Number one, what is a team? This is the definition I'd like us to keep in mind as we go through today. Whenever we use the term team, it's a small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, performance goals, and approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. And I really like this definition because to me it encompasses everything about what a team is. And just to break it out a little bit, a team is a small number of people. They've done research on what number basically is optimal when you're looking at a team size, and it's somewhere between 5 and 11 people, 5 and 7 people, some people say. So it's not a real large number. And the reason for that is because if it gets too big, it's difficult to lead and manage. And if it's too small, it can be micromanaging. So 5 to 7 is probably the appropriate number for a team. Now, what does that mean if you're working in a larger organization? Well, you have teams that make up other teams, and so you can think about it in that context. The smaller number teams make up the larger team, especially in organizations that are multi-leveled. So small number of people. The second thing is complementary skills. We all have skills that effective teams have people who have skills that complement each other, that are not everyone knowing how to do just the one thing or being experts in any just one thing, but there are different people good at different things. And so if you're working with a team as a leader or part of a team, it's a good idea. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a little while, but it's always a good idea to find out, okay, what are the skills that the people on our team have? What are people good at? What do the people need help with? So that we can learn how to complement each other as we begin working together and working forward. So what are the complementary skills? Common purpose and goals. This is something in my experience that is often overlooked, often not made real clear to people on a team. In other words, why are we a team? Why are we getting together? What's important in this department that I work in, or in this organization that I work in? What's the common purpose? What's our mission, if you will? And within the context of that mission, what are the goals that I should be striving for that would help us to achieve this overall purpose of whatever that might be? Oftentimes, I think it's especially if you're part of a team is part of a much larger organization. There's an assumption there that we're all sort of working for the organization and heading in the same direction, and that's not always true. And I think the other thing that team members often don't understand is, what is my role? What is our team's role in the overall achievement of the organization's goal and vision? So this is real important from that standpoint. And I'm going to share a tool with you a little bit later on in this discussion that will help you in that regard if you don't have something there already. And then tied to that is a common approach. How do we go about achieving these goals in order to get us to achieve this mission? What's the approach we're taking? What's the plan, if you will? And again, in my experience, it's, if a team is part of a larger organization, there's often a plan for the organization, but when it gets down to the individual teams, oftentimes there is no plan, if you will, on how to support the overall plan. And what's the approach? How does each team within the organization approach the success of the organization as a whole? So common approach, the meetings are consistent and communication is consistent and so forth. And then mutual accountability. This is so important. The issue around how do we hold each other accountable for the actions that we should be taking. This, in my experience, has been probably the weakest area within teams I've worked with. It's this accountability issue. It's not only holding the team accountable for its results, but team members holding each other accountable from the standpoint of getting things done. We hesitate to call people out. We hesitate to say, call people out when they haven't contributed their piece of whatever they were supposed to do in order to make the team successful. And so this is an area that is often a weakness, I think, in a lot of teams. How do we hold ourselves mutually accountable? And I've got a couple of thoughts that I'll share there with you a little bit later on. But, so that's the definition. That's what composes a team. Small number of people, 5 to 7, 7 to 9, somewhere in that area. Skills that complement each other, headed in the same direction, using the same approach, and holding each other accountable for whatever the team is supposed to achieve. So as we talk about team today, this is the characteristics of the team that I'd like us to keep in mind. Now, we're going to talk about the stages of team development, and we're going to look at this work was developed by a gentleman named Bruce Tuckman. Dr. Tuckman was a Princeton-trained psychologist. He did his work in the early 1950s and 60s at Ohio State University, and his primary work centered around the issue of team and group development, along with, interestingly enough, procrastination in college students. I thought that was sort of an interesting dichotomy there. But at any rate, he's known best for his work with team development and the stages of team development. And so this is the model that Tuckman used and proposed as it relates to groups and teams forming and developing. So, and this is the model that we'll go through, but in terms of the team development. So he's got 5 stages here, and they begin really with forming, and we'll go through each stage and kind of talk about the characteristics. But he's talking about the teams forming, and then going through what he called storming, where they get to know each other and struggle and trying to understand what the team is all about and so forth. And then at some point, teams reach what he called the norm stage, where they operate, typically get from factual standpoint, from a work standpoint, start doing their work. And then at some point, teams, if they're fortunate enough to be able to achieve this performing stage, they reach that stage and are successful in exceeding their expectations of themselves and the expectations of the organizations that they're in. And then at some point, teams adjourn when whatever it is they're trying to achieve is over. They typically disband. So those are the stages, and we'll get into each of them in a little bit more detail. But this is Tuckman's work, and so again, forming, storming, norming, performing, and he actually did the first four. Most of his work centered around those four, and then in the later stages of his life and of his work, he added a journey with one of his associates, as they looked at teams being not necessarily going on forever. And so these were the stages that they came up with. So the first stage is what he called forming, and the characteristics of forming include, of course, leader dependent. Oh, and before I go any further, keep in mind that these stages are not stagnant. In other words, once a team reaches performing, it doesn't necessarily stay there. These stages are very dynamic, and teams go through them up and down depending on the situation that the team is in. You know, it may at one point be forming and go through storming and hit norming, and then something happens to the team. You know, a team member leaves, a new project is formed. They're struggling with whatever they're trying to achieve. Their leadership changes. They may go back to the stage of storming, or in fact, if it gets, you know, they lose a lot of members or they lose the leadership, they may go back to forming. So that it's a very dynamic process. So once the team hits performing or norming, doesn't mean it stays there. That especially today, with change being as quick as it is coming down, the teams go through this quite often. And you know, in government, for example, you know, with elections, typically the leadership changes every 4 years. And what happens is, again, the teams that work in let's say the state government or the county government, they have to go through this process again. They have to reform, because oftentimes the leadership is reappointed, or the team members change. So it's a very dynamic process. So forming, the characteristics of forming, very leader dependent, because teams coming together for the first time, and typically they look to the leader for whatever direction they're going in, for information, for direction, for purpose, and so forth. So it's very leader dependent. Strong leadership is very important here. And again, people need to be reassured because it's the first time they're coming together. So a lot of times they're not clear. What are we gonna? They have an idea on what it is they're supposed to be doing, but oftentimes they're not. It's not real clear. So they need to constantly be reassured with respect to where we're going and how we're going to get there, and how we fit within the overall organization, and so forth. There's a mixture of enthusiasm and skepticism, as this is generally the case, right? And it goes across the board from very enthusiastic, they're called early adopters, right? People who just love change, they get into it, they like being part of the team. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are the people that why do we have to change? Why do we have to put the team? Why do we have to do it this way, right? There's people on both ends of the spectrum as it relates to team formation, and everywhere in the middle. So there's a mixture of that, depending on the size of the team. And there's very little trust that goes on with the team. Why? Because, you know, people trust being vulnerability. People aren't willing to certainly be vulnerable because they don't know anybody yet. They don't know the direction the team's going in, and so forth. So those are the characteristics. So if your team is forming and you see these kinds of things going on, understand that it's very natural, very normal for a team that's first coming together. So if you're a team leader, or if you're a participant on a team that's going through forming, you know, what are some of the ways to kind of manage that process? Well, make sure people get to know each other. I think oftentimes we get into situations where it's kind of a surface sort of thing where people get to know the names and how long I've worked here and so forth. But you really want to get people to sort of try to get to know each other at a level that's deeper than that. But at the very least, get people to know each other, who they are, where they came from, previous employment, and so on and so forth. Maybe something a little bit on a personal level as well. And then clearly communicate to members on the team on what it is that we're doing. And again, I go back to that concept of common purpose, common mission, common approach. Clearly communicate. These are the things that we have to get done so that people start to form a picture of what it is that they're supposed to be doing from the standpoint of being a team. Why are we coming together? What's our purpose? How long do we have to get this accomplished and so forth? And then very important thing here is what's my role? What's my role on the team? And by that, I mean, I think it's important to define the role, not only say, let a person know this is your position, this is what you'll be doing, but I think you have to get deeper than that. You have to define it from the standpoint of what's the job as well, or what's the role, as well as, what are some of the things that are expected. And there's a tool that I think is very important to use here. It can be very helpful to use, and it's called a team charter. And that charter is exactly what it says. It's a charter. It's a list of items that designate what's the purpose of the team, what are the things the team's going to try to do to accomplish that, who's on the team, what are the roles and responsibilities, and it goes into areas like meeting, decision making, and things of that nature. Now, later on in this discussion, I'm going to share a little bit more detail. And when you receive the written materials after the program, there's a more detailed outline of what a team charter looks like, and there's also a template there that you can use that might help. I don't see these too often in my work, where teams actually sit down and write things out. Now, I'm not sure the reason for that, but I found it very helpful when in fact it's down in writing, so people can kind of see this is why I'm here, this is my purpose, this is our purpose. And I've seen it where teams actually take their charter and everybody signs it and they put it up on the wall so everybody can see who they are and why they're there and what they're doing. So there's kind of two ends of the spectrum there with this tool, but you may find it appropriate in your team, in the teams that you're part of. So I'll be sharing a little bit more about that later. And then finally, I think it's important to set personal goals, not just the team goal, but personal goals in a sense that what is the role of each individual on the team to achieve the overall purpose of the team. So what's my goal? What goals do I have in order to contribute to the overall direction of the team? And that can be part of understanding my role and coming up with a goal for each person in order to be successful at achieving the overall purpose of the team. And finally, building trust. As I mentioned, the characteristic of team forming is very little trust. Well, I think it's important to try to build trust in a team, especially when a team is forming. And one of the things that I found very effective, and I'll just real quickly kind of share this. One of the things that I found very effective with teams, especially in the form stage where they want to start building trust with each other. At some point, as the team is getting to know each other, there's what I call a building trust sort of exercise, and it's very simple. It comes up with maybe 3 or 4 questions that as the leader, you ask everybody to kind of think about, like, where did you grow up? Very simple things. Where did you grow up? Where are you? And do you have brothers and sisters? If you do, where are you in the scheme of things as far as your siblings are concerned? And then maybe something that was in your childhood as you were growing up that was difficult for you, or that you felt was unique, a unique challenge you had growing up. Something that was important that comes to mind right away. Something that really frightened you, or what was the worst job you had? Some significant event in your life, or something that's really consequential as you were growing up. think about those things. And then once people have had a chance to kind of chew on it, then go around the team and have everybody share. This is a good way to begin to become vulnerable, but in a very safe kind of way. You're not sharing, deep, dark secrets. You're not sharing stuff that you're not comfortable with. These are very, very, very surfacey kinds of things, but it's a process of getting people used to this concept of, hey, the more, I can build trust by getting to know people at a level a little bit deeper than I know them now. And talking about your past in a positive way. What happened in your childhood that was really good? We'll talk about your family. It can be a good way of sort of leading into that. So something to think about. Very simple. Come up with the answers to those questions, go around the team and have people share. And can go a long way towards beginning to build trust, camaraderie, breaking the ice between people. So something to think about. I found it sort of effective there. So with keeping that in mind, I want to take a look at, I have a couple of video examples here of these stages of development. They all come from a movie called Remember the Titans. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but it was produced, back in I guess it was the early 80s. And it talks about a football team and the development of a football team, football coach and the football team. And it was actually a true story. This took place in the South, and the coach that was coaching this team, it was a left, and it's an integrated school. There's black students and white students, and they were very at this point anyway, they weren't real close. And so the coach that left, very successful coach, always winning, he retired, and they brought in a new coach who happened to be African American, happened to be black. He was played by Denzel Washington, and it's the story of how he came into this situation of where there was to some degree segregation, and how he brought that team together in terms of new guys getting together with experienced recruits, black folks getting together with white folks. It was an amazing team building allegory, if you will. And so I've got some clips here that I want to share that to me clearly demonstrated some of these stages. So this is the stage of forming, and this is when he first came in contact with the football players. So think about that. Remember, it's leadership, it's leader dependent, and so forth. So this will give you an idea. So you can see how he handled the coming together of the forming stage, right? This is not a democracy, it's a dictatorship. And it's very leader dependent, everybody getting to know each other and so forth. So that's forming. Then getting into after teams form, there's a natural sort of, in terms of productivity, natural decline called storming. And what Tuckman identified was that it's a necessary process that teams need to go through in order to become norming and performing. And before we get into the description, keep in mind that this is not a stage you want to skip. If your team is going through some of the characteristics we're going to be talking about, understand that this is a normal development process, and to try to avoid it or skip through it or bypass it, because this is very important in terms of team development. So what are the characteristics? Frustration, people beginning to, people struggling with where are we going and what are we doing and why are we doing it this way and why do I have to sit over here and how come we've got to meet this often and so on and so forth. And why is the leader doing this? The old guy never did it. So there's frustration, which is natural. And most of the interactions are task related. There's very little people related here. It's mostly getting things done, right? Here's what we've got to accomplish. Let's get them done. So it's more getting the tasks that are needed to be done. Member confrontations begin. It's natural that people begin to conflict with each other, and the reason for that, as you know, is not everybody sees things the same way. It's very normal to see that and to expect that. So there's a lot of confrontation going on in the storm stage and a lot of concerns over, can we accomplish this? This is too much to, are we going to get all of this done in the time that we have, and concern about too much work and not, especially today with the staffing issues that I alluded to earlier, right? Everybody's having to do more with less. And so there's a lot of concern among teams now with respect to workload. And so, again, contributing to this whole storm stage. So these are some of the characteristics of this. And again, remember, it's very normal. So, what do you do here as a team member, as a team leader? How can we help manage ourselves through this so that we successfully take advantage of, if you will, these characteristics? What can we do here? Well, make sure that you've got very clear goals, roles, and objectives, and that's where that team charter comes in. And get very clear on what people need to do and where we're going to go and how much time it's going to take us to get there. What's the expectation? So everybody is clear on those. The more clear we are on expectations from a team perspective, the quicker we kind of get through this storming. So everybody can focus on what they should be doing and where the team is going. Second thing is try to resolve differences. Don't run away from them. The tendency is always to try to get away from the differences. It's too uncomfortable. Why? And so we don't pay a lot of attention to those things. We try to just move on. My suggestion is not to do that, to try to confront them and deal with the conflict, because out of that conflict come the solutions. And again, we don't have a lot of time to talk about conflict resolution in a team environment, but don't run away from it. Try to resolve it. Try to get people to work out their differences, because out of those differences come the kinds of successful solutions and communication within the team. Collaborate. If we look at this from the standpoint of what we need to achieve as a team and where we're going and what our objectives are, how can everybody work together to get there from a working together standpoint? And then finally, understand that, as I said, storming is normal and necessary. And instead of seeing it as a bad thing, see it as a necessity and try to work through this issue of resolving differences, making sure we're clear on goals and roles and objectives, and then trying to build this sense of collaboration. Everybody has to contribute to the overall success of the team. This is a tough place to be for teams. And some teams go through it quickly, others struggle through it, but it's in the struggle that the successful issues come out. So don't try to run away with it. Try to stay and hang in there and deal with it. Resolve the differences. Make people clear on where they're going. Let people know what role they're playing in the overall process of things, and get people to understand, hey, this is the normal part of development from a team development standpoint. And at some point, what happens is teams go through this storm stage, and eventually, as they come out of it, they enter into what's called norming. And basically, it's characterized by getting the work that's supposed to get done. And typically, it's shared leadership where the team members, as they begin to understand their roles, responsibilities, and goals, what happens is they start to share the leadership among the team. Smart team leaders begin to pull back in terms of direction. In the beginning, remember, it's a dictatorship, not a democracy. But as we reach this stage, in terms of the development, the leader pulls back, continues to articulate where the team needs to go, but begins to share how it gets there, what people think, or how they contribute to the overall direction, sharing leadership. And that develops ownership. So, different important characteristic. Again, issues continue to be confronted because they're going to come up. Not everybody sees things the same way, but hopefully, when they've gone through the storm stage, they come out of it understanding that differences are okay. And it's important to confront them, because out of that, as I mentioned, the solutions, better solutions occur. It's characterized by cohesiveness, right? If people start to collaborate, they start to collaborate around goals, they start to come together, and they start to become one thing, become this entity that is made up of all these members. And that's why earlier when I said that the importance of having, especially with staffing shortages and so forth, you want a team that's cohesive and collaborative, because it's going to need to take and help take the place of a lot of the shortages that go on. What can the team do to help deal with some of these issues that we have to deal with because we don't have enough people? How does the team collaborate cohesively around those issues? Acceptance of roles. Again, if I'm clear on what my role is from the beginning, I'll start to accept that as time goes on. And by the way, roles change, right? Roles evolve. So in the beginning, it may be one thing, and then as the team moves through storming, it gets to norming, maybe the role changes a little bit or it gets modified. Procedures are set now and followed, so that there's policies, procedures which help keep the team formed, keep the team cohesive, keep the team moving in the right direction, allows new members to understand what it is they do, why the team's doing this, what are the procedures here, how often do we meet, how does a team meeting held, how do we make decisions, and so forth. And then you start to build more team-related interactions. And here's where I always recommend that teams begin to look at what can we do outside of work to help pull the team together. Some teams that I know of, they have once a quarter, they take everybody, they have a team luncheon or a departmental luncheon where they pull the team together, and outside of work or during work, but it's not work related, so it's more team related with respect to activities. Some do it after work, depending on whether the team would like to do that. But so that becomes the characteristic of norming. So again, as I said, how do you manage that balance? In the beginning, you're focused on work and getting work done, policies, procedures, goals, objectives, roles. And as that goes on, you begin to start to focus more on people, as I said, getting people to know each other deeper, having get-togethers quarterly. Some do it monthly as people get to know each other at a much deeper level. And again, mutual planning, mutual leadership, get everybody involved that you can in the process of planning to achieve your objectives. You start to get cohesiveness. Instead of fighting, which they each shared their bamboo stalk. That's kind of interesting. So a quick clip that demonstrates this characteristic of storming and then how the team gets into norming. Again, the same football team. They've played together for a while now, and they've gone through the form stage. Everybody knows what positions they're playing and so forth. And here's the storming and the resulting norming.
That uniform on, that Titan uniform, you better come to work. I think
So you can see they struggle through the storm stage, and they work out the differences on the team, and then they end up as a team, and a very successful team, by the way, in terms of state championship and so forth. As I mentioned, that's a true story. And one more clip, you'll kind of see that in terms of performing. So finally, when the team is norming for a while, and as it begins to work together, it kind of gets into what's called flow, where things really flow real well, and as they work harder towards achieving the overall goals, and all these things start to come together, they oftentimes peak, right? And that's called performing, characterized by a real openness and trust and mutual respect with each other. It's a whole different sort of culture within the team. Everybody's open, everybody shares what they're thinking, they're vulnerable, so they trust, and they respect each other at a mutual level. And there's a balance again between task and team. There's tasks that need to get done, and there's work that we do to sustain and maintain the strength of the team. So as I mentioned, team activities, outside of work, during work, as well as a focus on getting things done. And then finally, in terms of performance, what happens is the team kind of becomes autonomous and self-directed. After a while, the leader can step back and the team can begin to sort of define its own approach to the different issues that it needs to face. How is it going to do certain things? The team takes on almost another entity, and it starts to define itself. It becomes very self-directed in terms of what it needs to get done, and a certain level of autonomy occurs. So it's a self-directed team after when it hits this performing stage. And in order to do that, it's very flexible and adaptable because change continues to come at it, but this time it's much more because of the trust and mutual respect. These changes don't impact it as much, and they're able to adapt to them, given a change in leadership, a change in membership, excuse me, and so forth. And ultimately, it self-manages. So there'll be very little need for the team leader to manage the team. The team manages itself. And then you know you're in this performance stage. So how do you manage that? You continuously try to improve the overall operation within the team, the processes, the procedures, continuous improvement, incremental improvements to achieve this overall perfection called performance. So what can we do today that's a little bit better than what we did yesterday? So constantly trying to get better. And then, of course, celebrate accomplishments when they've achieved things, so that there's a feeling of accomplishment within the team. Something that's not done enough, I think, in terms of team development. So here's an example of performing. This is the state championship football game, and they're playing for the championship against a team that's much stronger and bigger and constantly winning more than they are. These two young ladies that you see in the video are the blonde is the assistant coach's daughter, and the other girl, the African American girl, is Denzel Washington's daughter, and they're constantly at odds with each other over. I mean, they're good friends, but they're very different kinds of personalities. So this is the final game, final play, actually. And then finally, if the team is, I thought the clip was awesome. You can see the celebration and that peak experience of winning the football game and the state championship, and the next season, right, they go right back to what? Forming again, reform the team, and go through the storm process and so forth. So a good example, I think, of what we're talking about. And then finally, the team ends. Oftentimes, teams are put together for a shorter period of time, and so they officially end. They adjourn. Or over a project, they may adjourn. Once the project is complete, even though it is a team that continues forward, there should be some kind of an ending process to it in that case. And so in that sense, the team officially ends. And how do you manage that? Well, you achieve closure on a positive note. We accomplished what we were trying to accomplish. We got the things done, and congratulate everybody on achieving the goals, and reflect on what they learned through the participation. How did they grow through this process? And that can be done even if the team isn't going to disband. That can be done when the team achieves a certain goal that it wants to achieve in terms of, in terms of what it's trying to do, what it's trying to accomplish. So it's a way of kind of putting closure to that project and understanding, okay, we're moving on to other things. So adjourning, something that I think we don't often think about, but it's a good way to provide closure for one thing and move on to another. And so this is the final clip. This is the final goodbye. One of the their teammates. This is a little bit later on after the team has disbanded, and one of their and moved on to college. One of their teammates passed away. The player that you saw in the bed there at the end. Long story short, he was the injury that he sustained disabled him, and he was eventually later on, unfortunately, he was killed in an automobile accident. And so this is their coming together at the funeral, and a journey. So that's the presentation and the stages of team development, and I hope that you found some value in terms of what we shared this afternoon, and found some things that can apply. And what I would encourage you to do now is, what's important is really where we go from here. And so some thoughts in the handout that you're going to receive. There's a page that contains an action plan. And what I'd like you to think about is go ahead and take a look at that and reflect on what you've learned today. What stage of development is the team you're in, the team you're currently a member of, or teams? And then how can you move from the next stage to improve performance in the current stage? And select the tactic or two that you see in terms of the tactics that were presented. And you'll find others, as I said, in the handout. And try to move, excuse me, and try to move forward from there. What are the things we can do to move from storm to norm effectively, from norm to perform, and so forth. So thank you very much for your time and for taking time out of your busy schedules, your lunch, to spend some time learning about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Big
You're welcome.
mahalo from all of us here at ikahi, and as well as all of our attendees. So thank you all for coming today. Please take a few minutes to fill out our short survey online, which really helps with our grant funding for this free series. You can go ahead and find that survey link in the chat. And be sure to also check your emails in the coming days for the slides and the handout and the video link. And I'll also be sure to include that survey link once more. So thank you all so much for coming, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.